could point out in which you're seeding like that in terms of not being able to go?
There are 2 or 3 areas I'm looking at. One is what we're going to be able to do about the future of air dominance. I started an initiative with DARPA about 2 years ago to look at concepts for what would happen, what should we do, not just for aircraft, but for aircraft and all the things that go with it to control the air. The F-35 is obviously our flagship program. We're very committed to it. It brings a lot of capability to the table, but it has to operate with external sensors, with weapon systems, with jamming systems like the one that Bill mentioned, and a suite of capabilities. So what's the next generation suite of capabilities going to look like? And what do we need to do to help make that a reality? So that's one really big area, because control of the air is so critical to our military capabilities. An increment of capability that we don't have right now. I'm concerned about reacting to some of the threats that I see. I'm concerned about our electronic warfare capabilities and what we can do there. I'm concerned about our weapon systems, our missiles, and the balance between us and other people. There are a range of people. One of the things that people noticed out of the Gulf War and the things we've done since is that precision weapons had a huge advantage. If you'll remember back to the Gulf War, those of you who do, when the Scuds were being launched, they had an accuracy of within maybe a kilometer or two. They couldn't hit anything, so they were much less of a threat because of that. We demonstrated very precise munitions in the same time frame. Other people are doing that now. So our ability to deal with those types of threats, and I'm talking about cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, I'm talking about anti-ship, anti-fixed installations, and air-to-air. So we need to be moving ahead and countering all of those. So those are just a few of the areas. Another one I'll mention is space. We enjoy a lot of advantage because of our capabilities in space, but we have some things that are very visible and very big and very expensive up there. And people are doing a range of things that could counter those. So being able to provide more resilient capabilities, such as the ones we enjoy from space right now, very high on my list also. And I can't leave out cyber. Cyber is another one that obviously we have to focus on too, both from the defense and the offense perspectives.
Now, Greg Bloom, often when we think about the aerospace industry, we think about the 6 major primes, but the suppliers play an increasingly important role here as more work is pushed down to you. Now, how are you dealing with the current budget environment and this instability?
Well, as I said, sorry, scared me there. Back, everybody, let's go back to Bill. It's difficult. One of the things that I really believe, and we were testifying this week to the Appropriations Committee. There's a lack of understanding. The systems that these gentlemen create are complex, integrated, phenomenal weapon systems that require smaller sub-assemblies, materials, etc., that, quite honestly, we supply them. So we understand what the actual supply chain looks like. And I can tell you we are very, very concerned. We don't have a smaller company such as Seal Science. We don't have the large portfolio of programs to leverage overhead over. I can't have 10 physicists to work that we can split up because we may only have 5 programs. So the financial ability or the financial wherewithal of the small businesses to survive during sequestration is very, very difficult. Secondarily, redundancy within a company, under $500 million, you can't have multiple guys that know multiple things. We just have to be a lot leaner. And the worlds that we all play in, you can't transfer classified technology to a book and wait for the next engineer to come train them. A lot of the knowledge transfer is basically from, we call graybeard, Wes calls, the silvering of the industry. That's our institutional IP. It's the ability to have these smart elder scientists train the younger scientists and pass it on, especially in the classified worlds, to maintain that. And it's at risk. It's currently at risk, and I can tell you our ability to find the next generation, we have certain areas I don't think will get plugged. And I know we're sole source to a number of programs that we're the only company in the country that can do it. And I don't know how we're going to reconstitute that unless something is done to protect the ability of engineers to come to work in our industry. And back to the point, it's not necessarily why do engineers come. I mean, they're all patriotic. They want to be part of this. This is cool stuff. However, it's not necessarily job security, but it's the lack of job insecurity. We dealt with people at Lockheed that were working with NASA. An entire design team left because they were tired of going to work every day and saying, is the NASA budget getting cut? They went into industry. They're not coming back. So it's not just job security. It's stop the insecurity. Stop the fear every single day that I'm going to lose my job.
And can I add something about the supply chain? So Aerospace Industries Association this year put out a survey to our membership. We have over 300 companies across the aerospace and defense industry that are members of AIA with just some very straightforward questions. And one of those questions was, have you already, and this is 2013, first year of the sequester, have you already experienced a significant impact from the sequester? More than 80% of the respondents said yes. I think it was 88%, if I remember right. So we're seeing this in a very, very broad way already, and as we think about what's coming at us, if things are not changed, what's coming at us for 2014, where we take another big step down with a sequester, I think we should all be very concerned about the breadth of this impact across our supply chain. Many of these companies, not just small companies, even the medium-sized companies, will have to make the decision to get out of this industry.
Let me pick up on that too. The problem in part is that there are a lot of relatively small companies that support defense products that make very, very specialized products in very small numbers. And if they cut their sales by 20% or 30%, that can put them below where they're viable as companies. I'm working with firms at larger size like Wes's and Bill's. We're trying to understand the structure of the industry through all the different sectors and tiers. It's a very large, complicated industry. Trying to get advance warning of people who are in trouble. Working with the larger primes to do that because they're watching that very carefully too. The government has very limited capability to intervene. We have a little bit of a small amount of resources that we can apply to help people out that are in trouble. We can certainly work with the big firms to try and do that together and be more efficient about it. As we go through the budget process, we are very consciously considering industrial base impacts to try to see where we might need to do something. And some of the types of initiatives I talked about earlier may be pointed at some of those capabilities to try to sustain the industrial base until we get through what is going to be a pretty severe downturn and then back up. To give you a sense of the magnitude, sequestration doesn't sound that bad. It's a 10% cut. It's our second 10% cut, so that's 20%. But when we exempt military personnel, that pushes the number up to 13 or 14%. And then if you try to protect readiness, because that's your capability to fight today, you're pushing the numbers up for research and development and procurement both to numbers like 20%. And a 20% loss of business abruptly for any company is a very, very big deal.
Greg, do you feel as though that, as the Secretary said, we're working with the primes, do you feel as though that your message is being heard in terms of, where you're at and the, the need to maintain the people that work for you?
I mean, I can't say whether it's necessarily being heard or not. I can simply say to Wes's point about the impacts currently of sequestration, the magnitude of the cuts are important, whether it's 14 billion, 5 billion, 7 billion, doesn't matter. Engineers are rational. They say, why am I going to go into an industry, get paid 50% of going to Google and worry about a job? I can't hire engineers now. I'm trying to communicate it, trying to explain. We listened this morning and the whole policy speech on pivot to the Pacific, pivot to Asia. With what? What are they going to pivot with? They're going to reconstitute and all of a sudden we're going to respond to a Chinese threat with what engineers? Our industrial base is our engineers. It's our skill set, and they're going away. So, very 30,000-foot picture, you can come up with any strategy you want, but if you don't have the ability and the wherewithal to execute, you're toast. And I'm telling you right now, we are in a crisis situation, and unless we do something from an industrial policy standpoint for the industrial base, we will not survive. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but it's just, engineers aren't dumb. They're not going to come work in our industry if they face this.
General Schwartz, do you feel that way? And is this an unprecedented time?
I do. Although I have a certain amount of optimism, actually. I mean, those of us that have been around a while have been through 1 or 2 or 3 downturns, and we know, at least in the case of the Air Force, it's still the best Air Force on the planet. But there's a couple of things in this occasion which are different. One is we do not have the deep reservoir of excess capacity. Certainly the Reagan buildup provided that lasted for decades. Another aspect is that the competition is in areas that where there are lower barriers to entry. And so national wealth means less today than it used to in terms of asymmetric kinds of capabilities. I think the third thing is that the aura of the space program, which many of us grew up with, has long since dissipated. And so, as was said here just a second ago, the kids are making economic decisions. Mm-hmm. There's emotion involved and there's passion, I agree, but I think, the economics is playing a larger role here than perhaps was the case for our generation. And as a result, I believe that Frank Kendall needs to have the latitude to invest in those areas in which the United States of America must maintain the technological advantage. And we can debate what that is. I have a feeling, I mentioned a few, but that has to happen. And there are those, who will resist that as being sort of government intervention, but to that I say BS.
Absolutely.
Could I add one thing to that?
Sure, Wes.
Perspective? I think Marty made a really important point. We've been through some downturns before, and we've learned a lot about going through a downturn, how you manage it, how you get out ahead of it, how you structure and scale. But there is, I think, in addition, one other thing that is so different this time than even where we were just in the 90s, and it is the pace of technological progression around the globe. Frank made reference to it in his earlier comment. And I think it is too easy for us as a country to stand back and say, we have always been ahead, and therefore we will always be ahead. That's a natural conclusion you might reach. I think it's a fundamentally flawed conclusion. Mm-hmm. As a country, we've worked hard, actually, to promote education around the globe. If you look at many of our universities today with open line courseware, you can do a pretty good job of getting an engineering degree online sitting in another country. Now, yes, you miss a lot of the practicality of being in the lab with a professor, but we have actually helped increase the rate of technological progression around the globe, which is, from a broader societal perspective, probably a good thing. But from a defense and security perspective, we're in a different time. And if we pause too long, we will actually get past. As strange as that sounds, I'm convinced of it. We have to make sure that we recognize the reality of technological progression that's happening today and keep up with it. And actually, if we're going to be superior, we have to stay ahead of it. So that is, I think, a difference than what we've seen sometimes in the past.
Bill Swanson, is that a concern of yours as well?
Yeah, I'd probably take a different approach to this. As we sort out our problems here, there are things we can do that we're not constrained on. And if I pull on foreign military sales, for example, I know Frank and the department are working on. This is one way we can help our allies. We can help our technology because sometimes our systems need to be upgraded. Our allies are willing to pay for obsolescence or willing to pay for upgrades on our hardware. At the same time, the U.S. doesn't have to pay for it, and we help our allies. I just spent a week in the Mideast and sat across the table from crown princes and so forth who looked at me and said, do you know why we buy your hardware from the United States? We buy it because our enemies think twice about doing something to us when we get the world's best. So we have an opportunity here collectively to speed up the process because it takes a long time to get through it. I'm not saying the system's wrong. I'm just saying speed could be our friend rather than our enemy. And if we could sell some more of our systems, help our allies defend themselves, I'm not talking about offensive systems, we in essence help them, help ourselves, and lower our overhead costs domestically because we're not buying as much. And I think we ought to figure out, can we agree on that to go attack and go do something on to get a solution? And so for me, I think that's something or a lever we can all push that will help us as we get through these tough times.
I pick up on that because I think Bill's made a good point. We benefit in a number of ways from foreign sales. We get closer relationships with people that are friendly with us. We can operate more effectively with them, and we go to war together if we have to. We benefit, of course, our industrial base benefits from the increased volume of sales. We get cheaper prices in the U.S., and we can use our friends' research and development money to supplement our own and to move things forward together more quickly. That's all positive. The thing that I know Bill runs into a lot, two things. One is that it's getting more competitive out there, right? And the other is that it's very tedious getting things approved and out in the U.S. system so you can actually market them and sell them overseas.
The general pointed that out, the antiquated.
Yeah, we have taken a number of steps to try to improve that, but there's more that can be done. And in a couple of areas, we need some legislative help. So there are some things that Congress can do to make this more easily. Foreign sales more predictable and more quick to execute, which are two of the things that are really plague us when we go out and try to sell to our partners.
Does that take on an increased importance now with the current budget environment? As a way to come more boost up the revenues? And I mean, are you working harder to get that process streamlined?
My answer is yes. I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's probably the best I've seen in years. But collectively, when you do this, it's not only DOD. It's state, it's commerce, it's the Hill, it's industry, and it's also educating our foreign partners because not a lot of them have done an FMS, foreign military sale. So they look at that as an ominous process. And we need to help them understand that, okay, it's in their benefit to do it because it's a very transparent process when you do it. And but I would tell you, I see momentum. I would sure like to see it a lot faster.
Greg?
Bill, and we appreciate FMS because we support the organizations that do it. That being said, in the specialized niche industries, I don't have physicists working on FMS. Those are legacy products. That's not next generation. We all know we're not giving our friends like stuff and next generation. So, we can monetize previous investments all day long, but does not give us something to work on in the future. We need to be focused on advanced weapon systems, next generation stuff, technologies that we can employ over the next 30 years. And unfortunately for us, again, this is from the smaller sub-tier, FMS, which is nice because we sell more products, I can't hire engineers to support it because I don't need them to.
But I think we ought to work that because, as Frank knows, we are working on upgrades that benefit our foreign customers, but the U.S. benefits at the same time. And it is cutting edge. I mean, we can't sell them a product that isn't going to meet the threat that they're facing. And so my point is that I think collectively the partnership between small business and larger companies is what is the issue, what are you trying to solve, and how do we look at that, and can we do it together?
This issue around export, I think, also has to be understood in the context of technological progression that we were talking about earlier. And we ought to all make sure that we learn from history. We made a set of decisions in the 1990s in the U.S. around preserving certain technologies for ourselves. Sort of the classic case was commercial satellite technology, where we decided that because of our view of what was going around the globe, we were not going to export that. So what did we do? We encouraged other nations, many of them our allies, to build that technology themselves. So they not only built it and enjoyed the industrial benefit of exporting it, we actually had no control over where that went. We were no safer as a result of trying to hold that to ourselves. In fact, I think we were less secure as a result of that decision. So we need to learn from that as we think about our export control approach as we go forward over the next few years. And I'll echo what Bill said. I think the work that the DoD has been doing, sort of with this overarching vision of building higher walls around fewer things, is exactly the right idea. And I think we need to make sure that we're getting the support that we need from all the other institutions of government to make that work. It will be key to actually helping to sustain our industrial capacity, and I think actually to promoting our security over the long term.
And I would add, Wes, and I believe Frank and the department's doing this, you can't protect everything.
Exactly.
Protect what you really need to protect, and that's where I see the focus going, which will change the technology and the way you do things, because we used to protect 1 meter accuracy. Everybody has 1 meter now.
Did you want to follow on that, Secretary?
No, I agree with that. We're trying to streamline our processes, make them more predictable, and create a structure of the technology that we protect. I give, as Wes put it, higher walls about the more important things, and then allow the other things that are comparable commercial products out there in foreign markets to be sold. So we're going along directly in exactly that way.
And let me just offer an operator's view of export. At least with major capital end items, you establish a relationship that lasts for 30 or more years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is not a trivial thing in the military to military relationship.
Wes, you talked about the satellite restrictions, and I've heard you talk about the same restrictions when it comes to UAVs. Can you talk a little bit about that, the importance of lifting some of the things that are holding you back in that regard?
Yeah, we're in an interesting place as a country. We're a signatory to a treaty, the Missile Technology Control Regime, to which we've been very adherent and been mindful about what it means in terms of UAV export. We need to be very thoughtful about this because we're about to do the same thing with UAVs that we did with commercial satellites. This is a class of technology that everyone around the globe has had an opportunity to see the impact of UAVs through the military operations that we've been conducting over the last decade. And they want it. And the question is going to be, where are they going to get it? Are they going to get it from an ally? Or are they going to actually go out and create it themselves and create a global capability for this class of technology? Are they going to be able to rely on us? I think this is an important strategic decision. Here again, the work that Frank and his team have been doing and the work that the Air Force has done and the Navy as well, to think about, okay, in that class of technology, what is it that we actually need to protect? What should we actually want to try and get into the hands of our allies, to Nordy's point about actually building those relationships? I think the DoD has its head around this in a very good way. I'm not sure we're quite there yet with all the other institutions of government that have a vote on this. So we need to get a broader set of strategic thinking applied. UAVs are just one example.
And the broader view of that would be, can you not make a distinction between those remotely piloted aircraft which are not armed and those which are reconnaissance, surveillance only?
Yeah.
Clearly, there should be a differentiation between the two, and the view of some in the government does not support that.
Is that something you're working on, Secretary?
Yes, in conjunction with the other departments that are involved, particularly, and with the Congress. Some of our closest friends are trying to acquire capabilities that are similar to our own, including armed UAVs in some cases. And there's a lot of emotion, as you're probably all well aware, about UAVs, drones, they're sometimes called right now. But there's a very widespread market out there for UAVs. There are a lot of people selling UAVs, including armed ones. And so you have to look carefully at whether we should penalize ourselves in that regard, particularly when it comes to our closest friends.
Now, I wanted to talk F-35 here. I remember I went up to Palmdale, where Northrop works on the fuselage, and I talked to a line worker, and he was, I was talking about the importance of the program, and he said, yeah, I expect to retire on this program. And he's like, well, but I also thought I would retire on the B-2. So the reason I bring up that anecdote is, do you think, Secretary, do you think that the buy will stay at 2,400? And I would like Wes and Greg to also address this on the importance of that for their business.
I get that question fairly often, actually. First of all, it's a decision that'll be made decades from now. The number is consistent with our force structure projections, and it's held for a very long time. I don't know 10, 20 years from now how many we'll end up buying. whether something else will come along that we want that we think is superior to the F-35. I have a hard time seeing that right now. But I do know we're going to buy a great many F-35s before the dust settles. It's an interesting program because it still gets a lot of criticism, and we're certainly not there yet. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have a fair amount of testing left to do. We still have a fair amount of software left to write. But we have stabilized the production cost, and they're coming down. They're coming down very consistent. In fact, a little bit better than our projections. We're doing a lot of work to try to get the sustainment cost down. We've got about 10% on a dollar basis left to go in the development program, so that's pretty far along. There's not much opportunity to save money there. There, we're going to work to try to get the cost of sustainment and production down more. So the program is a very different program than the one I looked at 2 or 3 years ago. And I think it's past the point where it's any real question about whether we're going to continue or not. And I'm feeling much better about the program than I have. I recently put out a decision memorandum indicating that based on what I've seen to date and review I just did last month, we should be able to ramp up production as planned in the budget next year. I want to make sure that some things get done before we do that. And we're working yesterday, in fact, on the criteria that we want to put in place to ensure that enough progress is made on all the aspects of the program that we can ramp up production. So I don't know if we're going to end up with the same number or not.
Yeah, I'm hearing maybe.
But I know it's going to be quite a few.
Maybe 2,400, maybe.
It's the question really isn't very relevant. That decision will ultimately be made by somebody a generation or so ahead of us.
Well, it's important to the guy on the line,
right? It depends. Well, I think he's pretty comfortable about retiring on the F-35. I think if you want to go back and see him, you could probably tell him that. The F-35 represents a quantum improvement. It's the kind of generational improvement we were talking about earlier. There are other things that need to go along with that aircraft to make it fully capable that we have to do as well. And I expect once we field it, like we have with the F-15, the F-16, the F-18, we'll be doing incremental improvements once it's out in the field. I'm sure we'll do that. So I think that it's a program that's going to be with us for quite a long time.
Wes and Bill and Greg, can you talk about that, the importance of the F-35?
I would just start by saying it's a phenomenal capability. I mean, this is an aircraft, and Nordy could wax far more eloquently on this than I could. But as we go through the test program and see what this aircraft can actually do, it's something that all of us are proud of to be a part of this program. So the big thrust of the last number of years, and I've been associated with this program pretty much since its inception, was to actually get us to this point where we're testing and we can see what a great aircraft it really is. Frank made the point, and industry has a big part of the responsibility here. We've got to make sure that it's affordable from a production standpoint, and so we have a huge effort underway on affordability. And we've got to make sure that the operational and sustainment costs are going to end up in the right place so that it's got a life cycle cost that's going to work. So I can tell you that this is an area that across the team, we are all working on aggressively under Lockheed's leadership, and I think we're making some good progress on that. The other part of this equation that will go into the ultimate number is how this is going to work for all of the countries around the world that are our partners on Joint Strike Fighter. This is an amazing program in that context of having brought so many partner countries together to support the development, to be a part of how we're actually rolling this out. And they're making commitments as well. And they care a lot about not only how it's doing in testing, but what the affordability numbers look like going forward and the operational and sustainment numbers look like. So there is a broad support for this program, both here in the U.S. and around the globe, that I think if we can do all the right things and hit all the right benchmarks, gives it an enormous opportunity looking forward.
Bill?
I would just add one word, that stability will be key, that the ups and downs, the irks and jerks are a death to a program. And, excuse me, when you're in our business, the one thing you look for is stable funding, stable requirements, and you can run for the goal line if you had that. So.
Greg, you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Seal Science is incredibly proud to support both Northrop and Lockheed on JSF. Absolute numbers, whether it's 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, is significantly less important to us and our workers than at least the certainty of the go forward. We still, and again, have supported this program for years now. with full rate production coming years ago, supposedly. And I tell our engineers and our critical tradesmen, it's coming. It's still coming. We've odds and ends, but it's going to be full rate production. There's still, I think, once the certainty comes in and we get that, I would say, clarity of continuance. I know we hear it and we believe it, but when my guys on the line that make the parts believe it, stop seeing the newspaper reports, they'll feel a lot more secure and they won't be jumping ship. So again, it's just, the continuance in that clarity is important.
A direct answer to your question on how many will be purchased, in my view, will depend completely on what the ONS costs of the platform end up being. So if 2,443 is the end game, provided that the industry drives down the ONS cost on this machine, that will help assure that outcome.
I'll make one prediction for you about 2025.
Sure.
And that is that we'll be in multi-year procurement of the F-35
All right.
in 2025.
Heard it here. Where are we on time in terms of questions? We were 15? Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and I wanted to know. Obviously, it's playing an increasing role. Is this something you see as a priority, Secretary, going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a task force working this recently. There's a lot of attention being focused on it. There are several aspects of cybersecurity. The one that concerns me the most is, well, first of all, I would say the security of our own networks, the things that we rely upon to do our jobs, both if we have to go to war and just to do things we need to do in peacetime. Within that, I would say that our secure networks, our classified networks, are reasonably secure. I've spoken in other forums about my concerns about unclassified data in industry in particularly, and also in government, which is a major problem for us. Those networks that protect that information are not secure enough. And the Secretary Hagel recently signed out a memorandum that says that we are going to basically start requiring industry, as a condition of working on contracts for us, to provide protection of unclassified technical information to a certain level and to report attacks, so that we start to get our arms around the degree of protection we have there. And I can't foresee where we'll end up in the future, but I think we're going to have to move towards much greater protections of our information. We are, I talked about the technological superiority and the race that's on always for technological superiority. When you're giving away your designs, even your unclassified designs, you're giving away a huge amount of time and money to your competitors. And we have been doing that. That is what has been happening. And it's happening at large companies and small companies that work for us. So we've got to do better there. And we're going to start down the path of requiring that better defenses be put in place.
Bill Swanson, did you want to add something to that?
No, I would just say in the cyber world, it's much easier to play offense than it is defense. And we ought to remember that.
Okay, we'll take a question. First question here.
Lieutenant Oliver Chang. It's an honor to be here, honestly, because probably such a rare opportunity for someone as my rank and my time in to be around such senior members. But I just wanted to say that I couldn't nod my head more in the beginning part of this conversation, and just to validate all the points that you guys have been making, especially since I'm the demographic that you're talking about. I was a school teacher before I joined the military, and now I'm an engineer working on the programs that you guys are talking about. And it's honestly just so frustrating in a lot of ways to see the inflexibility that I've experienced so far as a junior officer. I see my friends, like you said, go off to Google, go off to SpaceX, go off to a lot of other corporations which seem more flexible, seem more, quite honestly, sexy. You get to do something directly right off the bat. And I sit in my office and I essentially just play middleman between listening to what the contractor said, take literally that information and then just tell my commander, who already knows that information. What I'm basically trying to say is I really wonder what in the short term would be in terms of solutions, because I realize that there's such holistic issues here in terms of dealing with the budget issues, dealing with the system that it is. What in the short term, for somebody like my rank and my time in, or even other engineers, could you propose for us to have more risk? I mean, growing up, like you said, even though I wasn't of the era of Apollo, I always looked so endearing in terms of the risks that they took. I mean, we got to space so much faster than the Russians because we took risks. We didn't waste our time thinking, we need 100% on this program before we can do something about it. And I would love to see that in my time in, because I see a lot of members like myself, some of the other CGOs sitting in the office, thinking about when and how I can get out of the military. And I don't want to see that. I joined the military to serve. I want to stay in, but I also want to stay in feeling challenged.
I think Secretary Kendall will be good, and General, you want to follow up?
First of all, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for those comments. Those are terrific. I share your concerns. I mentioned earlier that we're accused of not taking too much risk. I think the opposite is true. We need to take more risk. We need to be more innovative and creative, give people the opportunity to fail. I know there are places that we're doing that. I see them every day. And I know there are some places where we're not doing that yet. My highest single priority in my position is the development of our workforce, particularly our technical capabilities and our business management capabilities within the government. If we're not smart and we're not cutting edge in the government, we can't work effectively with industry to ensure that they are. And people like you have got to be part of that. So that's a very, very high priority for me. And we're trying to do that across the department. I see pockets where we're doing great, and I see pockets where we're not doing quite as well. We've got a ways to go in that. One of my counterparts from the United Kingdom has decided that it's impossible for him to rebuild his government workforce. He does not have the technical management talent within his government workforce to effectively manage programs. So he's going to hire a third party, an intermediary, and this isn't a final decision yet, but he's headed in this direction, who will basically take on the role of managing industry and delivering, and the people who are actually delivering programs. He's going to essentially outsource that. I don't think we should do that. I mean, if you look back to the space program, the Apollo program, for example, that was done largely with in-house NASA people. A lot of the things we've done in defense have been with in-house people in supervisory roles and leading the direction that we went into and making sure that people got there. And we need to do that. And I think we've got the base that we can build on to improve our capability and do much better. And that's a very important personal goal for me. Marty?
I would just say that this is an example of how those who are silvered need to assure that we work in a way that is worthy of this kind of passion. And the Hill needs to hear this too, in order to offer management latitude. One of the reasons that SpaceX is sexy is because it's a private firm. It's a private sector firm with all the latitude that's associated with it. Now, I'm not suggesting sort of flipping that into the government sector in its entirety, but the notion here is important. And there are entities within defense that do rapid acquisition, that can do exciting things that you need to move toward. And do your homework, because those places will be eager to have your talent.
Next question.
Thank you. Good morning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you all for your comments, and this is Wanda Austin from Aerospace Corporation. Couldn't agree
Hello,
with you
Doctor.
all more. We're all working the same kinds of issues. My question for you today is, given the silver tsunami and the global competition for talent, the reality is that the issue we're talking about this morning is greater than defense. It's greater than the DoD. When we talk about cyber, everybody's got their skin in the game, whether or not they know it. So my question to you is, if you woke up tomorrow and found out that you had a sticky note on your pillow that says, as of today, you're responsible, you're going to be held accountable for fixing this problem, where would you spend the first dollar, and what would you do?
Secretary, you want to take that?
Well, I already am accountable and responsible, so the next incremental dollar that I would spend would be in research and development, and it'd be in the area of prototyping for future capabilities. Some of the more risky programs were talked about, skunkworks type programs, if you will, X-plane-like programs, things that are going to move the technology forward and long-term give us a very, very high return on investment. They're not the immediate return that we tend to focus on too much, I think. They're the things that are going to keep us in the game and keep us ahead in the game longer term.
Wes or Bill, would you like that question as well?
Well, let me say something, because I want to say something about Bill in this regard. One of the things that we all often do is we stand back and we look and say, well, why isn't government fixing something? Education is one of those areas where I think for too long there's been a focus on, okay, if we can only fix it by federal policy, or if we can only fix it. Because I think, Wanda, to your point, we're talking about the basic problem we've got around STEM education, and we're talking about the flow, the pipeline that we need. Bill has been a longtime member and drafted me into an organization called the Business Higher Education Forum. And this is a group of people who are getting together and saying, you know what, we are actually responsible. No one left the note on our pillow, but it's us. There's nobody else. We are actually responsible for what's happening in our country when it comes to STEM education. And the response to that has been, we've got to take it on. We've got to take that responsibility. We've got to invest. Bill, I'll say it so you don't have to toot your own horn, because I think it's important that it get illuminated. Bill and Raytheon invested a very large amount of money in developing some analytics on this that has been very, very helpful in both the higher education arena and in those school districts around the country that care about this, in better defining the problem and helping to focus on the issues both with teachers and with what's going on in terms of funding some of these programs. And a number of us across industry, not just in the aerospace industry, but I would say aerospace has actually been a leader in this, both individually and collectively with AIA. We're changing our investment model. We're investing in education in a very different manner, and we're doing it proactively by focusing on the programmatics that we think will actually make a difference in driving the outcomes in STEM. So I think we are all actually responsible, and I think we have to start acting that way. If we wait for some governmental solution on education and STEM, we'll be doing exactly the wrong thing.
Wes, thank you. My dad taught me a lesson early on in life. He told me I couldn't complain about something unless I was doing something about it. Very simple words, very profound, at least for me. And as Wes points out, Northrop and our company, Raytheon, 60% of our corporate giving is education. Our board looks at it as strategic, and it's something we have to do. I think we're making a difference. It's really tough. It's moves slow, but I find a lot of us, as we get older in life, one of the things we can do is give back. And most of us are here today doing what we do because of our education. And every senior person I deal with is getting engaged in some way to help. And so, no sticky note, but I can thank my dad for getting me in the middle of this and trying to do something about it. And if anybody's interested, it's running a company. It's a Business Higher Education Forum. We're always looking for members that are interested in education. And to the Air Force officer, I thank you for your interest in math and technology. And I think where we can help you and where Frank is going in the department, we need to have a strategy of where we're going to be headed in this environment rather than the dollars dictating what we should be doing.
Next question.
John Costello, Microsummit Corporation. It's nice to see such an esteemed group of people. I've had the opportunity to work with you guys, and I appreciate it. Number one, my question is actually twofold. In the era of sequestration, Better Business Practice 2.0, how is that being embraced by the primes, and is that trickling down to the supply chain, number one? Number two, as it pertains to FMS, do you believe it is achievable in light of the DEF program to achieve a single platform, assuming, of course, with the caveat of the proper anti-tamper information assurance technology being built into that platform, to be able to be exportable as well as used as domestic use? And will that cause some type of considerable saving and obviously interoperability with allies? Is that something that we see as, as an offset to sequestration?
General, do you want to answer that one?
Well, my experience with anti-tamper is that it's highly sensitive. I would sort of liken it to, in some ways, to the Snowden revelations. And I think that people, it's essential for companies to protect their intellectual property, and certainly software code and that sort of thing falls into that category. So anti-tamper, that serves that function is vital, both for self-interest and for maintaining the American advantage. I really can't speak to to the other issue.
Secretary, you wanted 2 points?
Let me just put a footnote in on anti-tamper. We have to do anti-tamper in our systems because even our systems that we own and control can fall into enemy hands by a variety of possibilities. So we do some anti-tamper just for that reason. And so if we have that as the base, then doing it for foreign sales isn't that huge a leap. We have to protect the most critical information on our platforms, and I think in general we're pretty effective at that. The better buying power. This is referring to a management initiative that has been going on for a few years now that Dr. Carter, when he was the Undersecretary and I was his deputy, we started. I've continued it. I've modified some of the initiatives. It's a list essentially of initiatives, all of which are designed to improve our efficiency and our productivity overall for the defense acquisition system, working with industry. And with a lot of interactions with industry on it. We're trying to change our culture in a couple of ways, and I do think we're making progress. I don't think we're there yet. We're using something called Should Cost, which is one of the initiatives, which basically just asks our managers to not just keep within your budget, but to analyze your cost structure, understand it, look for things that you can attack cost and reduce it, set a target for yourself, and then go manage to that to try to achieve it. Things like that I think are catching on. I've got great support from the services on this. I have great support from the chain of command and acquisition, and industry is responding to it. So I think we are making some good progress there. There are other areas that we've got a lot more work to do. People talk about acquisition reform a lot, and I've been through about 8 iterations of acquisition reform. There's no silver bullet to fix acquisition. It's about acquisition improvement. It's about finding a lot of things that you can do a little bit better and continuously improving all of your processes, finding best practices wherever they are and adopting them, getting better business deals that incentivize industry. It's a whole range of things. The path to success requires an awful lot of things done well, and the better you can do any of them, the better off you're going to be. So it's a continuous process. We're going to keep it up. One of the things that I hope to do over the next few years is another iteration, or even 2, a better buying power, as we learn from our experiences what works and what doesn't, and then apply those practices and keep improving. So I think in this environment, it's even more important with sequestration that we do this. We've got to be as efficient and productive as we possibly can be. I mean, it's a little demotivating out there right now between furloughs and shutdowns and pay caps and everything else we're doing. But our workforce is responding very well to this. I've got, I think Bob Hill's in the audience, or he's speaking later today. The comptroller, one of the things we fight against is the pressure to spend the money, to get the money out the door. That's not what we should be doing. We should be getting the best value we can for the money. And kind of getting the right balance in that is another area where we've got to make a lot of improvement. But we're getting there, and we're going to keep on fighting.
Next question.
This is directed towards Secretary again. I'm sorry, you stay on the hot seat. To set this up, I want to associate myself with the comments of Greg Bloom. We're also a modest-sized company, and we enjoy some sole source classified positions on your guys' programs from Northrop and Lockheed and Raytheon, et cetera. The question is this, sir. We are, in these times, and everybody's worried about budgets and the pressure's on, we are under such scrutiny. I had the privilege of running a small company before Meggitt acquired us, and I kept track one year of how many audits showed up at my door. And whether it was DCMA or the Department of Labor or OSHA or EPA or Bring Your Lunch, whoever, it was for every $400,000 of revenue in a $35 million company. Now, Mr. Secretary, have you tried to export that philosophy into the balance of government, the 800-pound gorilla in the room? I mean, us guys are over here trying to maintain budgets and keep within our caps, and we're getting audited out the wazoo. And I could see a huge return on investment if that same tactic was exported to other areas of government expenditure.
It's a really good question. I have not tried to work with OSHA, for example. I think there are people within my organization who do that. I have worked with DCMA, a Defense Contract Management Agency you mentioned, and also the Defense Audit Agency, which is not directly under me, but with which I work very closely. And we are trying to reduce the overhead burden associated with some of the things we do. I've got a large task force that just started under Katrina McFarland, my Assistant Secretary for Acquisition. I've reached out to industry, including Raytheon and Northrop, to try to get their ideas about ways we can reduce some of the overhead that's not productive. That is one of the better buying power tenets, actually. Let's try to find the things that really aren't giving us any return and get rid of them. And I think there's some fertile ground there to plow. I think we have a ways to go on that. I will comment, though, that we are under scrutiny ourselves. If you're a commercial firm and you overpay for something, nobody really cares. It's your money. Shame on you. But when the government pays, and this is a real example, $17,000 for a part that should have cost $2,000 to go in the Black Hawk helicopter, and you get on 60 Minutes, it's a little different story. So we do have to put things in place to protect the taxpayer's interest. The trick is to getting the right balance so that we're not putting so much of a burden on ourselves that the costs vastly exceed any return. One area where we're having some success is the audits that you mentioned. There's a huge backlog of audits, both pre-award and post-award contract closeout audits at the Defense Contract Audit Agency right now that's built up over time, partly because of staff reductions, partly because there is a risk averseness there. I'm working closely with the director there to do more sampling, so we take a risk-based approach to doing audits, and we're going to streamline and get rid of that backlog. And our goal is to get rid of some of those backlogs over the next year or two so that we get down to where people can be paid promptly and where contracts can be awarded promptly, and you don't have that kind of a burden. So we've heard it, and we're definitely working on the problem that you mentioned.
Okay, we have to take these last two questions here. I think we're going to have to do the same annoying double-prong question. Can you please?
Mike Antonovich, Los Angeles County. I was also a member of President Reagan's privatization commission that he had established. The problem, you are going to have a decline in your revenues in 2025, but it's not a result of overregulation or overtaxation. We have a problem, and we need to face that problem, which is our deficit. You cannot have a strong economy and a strong defense if we continue to spend more than we have. There's a need to have, with 80% of your budget as personnel, increase the productivity of the workforce, consolidation, elimination of feather bedding, and dealing with labor organizations, MOUs, and other type of regulations that prevent productivity. Allow your managers to have the ability to manage. But look at the bottom line. It's not overtaxation. We have so many additional taxes that come down every time, and fees and regulations that come all the time that are coming from Mount High. It's our policymakers who make these priorities. If they don't want to prioritize national defense, that's why you are where you are today. It's not because we are not being taxed enough. We are overtaxed. And as we've seen with President Reagan and President Kennedy, when they cut the tax rates, revenues increase, and then you have a strong private sector. We need to revitalize the private sector to increase the revenues and eliminate the feather bedding and the waste that's continuing not just in the federal government, but in all sectors of society. And Bill knows because he's been involved with the contract that we had and the red tape you had to go through. And again, it gave you some more gray hair, right? But it made you happy. But anyway, that's the problem. We need to face that reality. And that's the problem begins with us.
Sir, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to have to cut you off.
Thank you.
I think that's all the time that we have here. I want to thank all the panelists. This was a very interesting conversation. I knew it would be. Did you have one last comment?
We heard, I'm not pessimistic about our industry and where we're at. I think Wes and I would both agree that we added to do over again, we do it the same way. And I'm always left with the saying that a pessimist is really an optimist with experience. You got to think about that one for a second. But I just think, we should realize we still live in the greatest country in the world. We have the greatest military. I think we have an outstanding industrial base, and we will get through this. We've done it before. The key this time is let's make it happen a little bit quicker than we've done it before.
Well said. Again, guys, thank you very much for your time. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you.